Welcome to another in our series of Signal Conversations. Today, we're joined by Scott Rosenberg, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Platforms for Roku. So, Scott, before we get started, what does it mean to be Senior Vice President and General Manager of Platforms at Roku?
Yeah, sure. It's tech, so we wouldn't be tech without unusual titles. I run Roku's media business, so my team and I put all of the content onto Roku, whether that's Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, NBC, etc. We run the Roku channel, so that's a place where we host all the content that we bring onto the platform directly, and then I also oversee our ad business. The way we think about our business at Roku is job one is to get you to take a Roku powered device home, a stick or a puck or a television. Job two is then to engage and monetize you. And we do that through content and advertising. So my lot is that second part. I mean, we define the company and our mission pretty simply. Our job is to get content onto your TV. There was a time when OTT or streaming meant to your phone or to your tablet. We're very focused on the next way that we all get television, which is going to be on demand, over the internet, directly to the biggest piece of glass you got in your living room. And those changes have been underway for years now, as you point out. I think what we've just experienced with shelter at home is that sometimes it takes a shock to the system to really precipitate the next set of changes. And that's really what I think we've seen here. Consumers have been leaving linear television for years now. This year, for the first time among adults 18 to 34, a majority of TV time is streamed. I'll just say that again. A majority of TV time is streamed. That's the most important demo that we all think about. And yet, of course, more than half of monies spent on reaching adults 18 to 34 has not been spent on streaming. And so I think the very unfortunate market circumstance we've gone through here has forced everybody, marketers and platforms alike, to step back and say, wow, I've got to change my spending pattern. And now that I'm revisiting my first principles, I really need to prioritize where the audiences are.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, how do you, when you're talking to a large client, differentiate Roku's offerings from what seem over the past year to be, a torrent of streaming options?
Well, we're a platform, first of all, so we're a place where somebody like a Hulu or a Disney or a CBS has a service that they want to put in front of millions of users comes to partner with. So those are our partners, not our competitors. And then the actual number of platforms or devices that a consumer might use to put streaming content onto their television has actually been shrinking over time as it's become clear that scale matters. Scale matters for content owners, scale matters for advertisers. Roku's far and away the biggest streaming platform in the US, both in terms of active monthly users. On a global basis, we have over 43 million active accounts. Those are basically households. And it's also the most engaged user base. Our users are creeping up on 4 hours per day of streaming on a Roku device. So, I mean, that's the way I'd define leadership. It is a competitive business. We compete with big tech giants. The way I think we've won is we think about the consumer first and foremost. We try to put a value-driven, cost-effective device with great content and a very simple user experience in front of consumers. And that recipe, as well as the recipe of being good partners to our content providers and to our marketing clients like a P&G, are part of how we've gotten to where we are.
It seems that the content industry is almost superheated, and as a platform, if I want to make sure I've got this right, you're not, originating content yourselves, but rather working with people who make content, and services, subscription and others, that deliver that content over your platform. But do you think this superheated world of content is here for good, or is this, sort of a moment in time?
That's a really good question. Are we as an industry spending too much on content production. Now, I mean, that may be the case in hindsight when we look back a few years. The great thing, though, is as a consumer, there's just never been a better time in television. There's so much money being spent on so much great programming because everybody is piling into the streaming industry now and trying to compete, trying to be the new Netflix. And so it's a real renaissance in terms of the breadth and depth of programming available. I find myself watching, German sci-fi TV shows I would never have watched, but for the fact that Netflix is bringing them to me. So I think it's a real win for consumers. Whether it's fully sustainable long term, we'll see. The industry is changing very fundamentally. The biggest winners are going to be those who can invest and distribute content on a global basis. Our goal as Roku is to be the platform where they can reach the most engaged users to help those companies acquire users and ultimately to compete with each other for consumer attention. That's our role. We love playing that role, and it really helps us both celebrate the consumer because it's about putting great content in front of the consumer.
So let's talk about the role of advertising. The focus of this, edition of Signal is media advertising marketing, um, and Roku is an advertising platform, among other things. And you have services that are subscription only. You have services that are not. You have your Roku channel. First of all, describe how advertising works, generally on Roku.
Sure. Well, first off, almost every ad, with the minor exception of ads that might just be a linear broadcast pass through, is dynamically inserted on the Roku device on a one-to-one basis. So although it feels to the consumer like a TV experience, it's very much a digital platform, and it affords marketers all of the capabilities you've come to expect from a modern digital platform, using data to do advanced targeting and measurement, interactivity to engage a user, performance optimizing a campaign based on some metric you may care about, whether that's a top funnel reach, incremental reach metric, or a bottom funnel, they visited my store type of metric. So, uh, that's what I think is most exciting about OTT is the opportunity to bring all the benefits of digital advertising to a TV medium, and that's why we as a company have invested so heavily in enabling that ad future. Our view at Roku is that a platform like Roku has to play a key role in making TV advertising better, better for the consumer, more relevant, less interruptive, lower ad loads. And we also have to make advertising better for marketers. Marketers are not well served when a consumer starts to tune away from an ad experience because the ad load is too high, because there's too much frequency, because the ads aren't relevant. We think if you can solve those problems, you can deliver a better ad experience, you can perform a service to both consumers and marketers. I think the industry is in a state of transition where folks on both the buy and the sell side are still recalibrating. And so a lot of advertisers, a lot of marketers aren't yet ready to use all the tools. And frankly, some of the tools are too hard to use. And then many platforms haven't yet invested in the things that they need to invest in to produce that relevance, to prove that the advertising works better.
Yeah, no doubt. You recently launched something called OneView. Can you succinctly tell us what it is?
Yes, OneView is basically our ad tech stack, our ad platform. Last year, we bought a company called DataZoo. It was a smaller DSP in the industry. We've integrated it into our platform, and we've put into it all of our identity and data and measurement capabilities. And the whole goal with OneView was to enable a marketer who wants to use all those same capabilities, Roku's first party consumer relationship, Roku's unique data, uh, with across all of their buying, not just when they're buying media from Roku, but when they're buying media from Discovery, from CBS, et cetera. That's a key step for us in the evolution of our platform. It's enabling a P&G brand who has a committed spend with Turner, but who wants to benefit from being able to optimize reach and frequency across not just their Turner spend, but the other 10 people, the 10 entities that they're buying media from. By using OneView, our DSP platform, we're enabling you to use that common identity, common data to measure and optimize across your entire spend, not just in streaming, but in desktop and mobile. So it's a really a big step for us in terms of taking what we've always felt was our core value proposition, which is our first party consumer relationship, and making it available in a more robust way for marketers who want to use it across their media plan.
Does that media plan include what might be considered now traditional digital, as well as both streaming and apps and services that are digital but are purely video?
Yes, OneView is a full service DSP cross platform. Its unique strength, of course, though, is that its device graph and data are anchored in deep knowledge about the Roku household. So I think that the main thrust, or incentive for a marketer to use OneView is to get that unified view. We called it OneView for a reason, a unified view across their entire investment in OTT.
It strikes me that one of the things that's stopping, or creating the stutter step, evolution of this medium isn't necessarily the technical. It's the almost anthropological. When I think about the performance marketing teams versus the brand awareness, the brand teams, they don't sit in the same floors. They're not talking to each other on a regular basis. Their creative's different. Their execution flow is very different. They're not connected. And I imagine that the number of marketers who are really effortlessly putting the two together on your platform is relatively low, not because it's not possible, but because the industry isn't really built that way right now.
I think it's resolving, but I love the characterization of it being anthropological. I 100% agree. And by the way, that exists on both the publisher vendor side as well as the buy side. Is when we first started building this business, we had a fork in the road, and we thought, do we hire TV sellers or do we hire digital sellers? And we've actually found we have to do both, but we generally start with digital sellers and train them on how to talk television, rather than the other way. And I think that same sort of anthropological challenge is playing out on the agency side and on the client side. The industry's getting there, and there's a surprising number of people now who have both experiences. In the end, I think ROI, return on ad spend, is all that matters, and that's why on our side, our whole goal is, at the end of the day, is just trying to prove that the media works better. And we think if we do that, then long term, it'll the budgets will be reshaped over time.
Right, right. Last question for you. We've been talking, at least I've been in the frame pretty much of the United States, but are there
Yeah.
different consumer behaviors, different opportunities, different approaches being taken outside the United States that US marketers might learn from?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Um, we I would say that the market context matters a lot, on not just on the advertising side, but on the content side. If you look across Europe, for example, free to air broadcast programming plays a much bigger role. Concentration for how consumers get television is much higher in Europe than it is in the US. So that sets up right there a big difference. You look at UK or Germany. Um, these countries have a lot more, as a percentage of dollars traded between the biggest networks and the biggest agencies, than we see in the States. So, um, some markets, UK for example, have moved more digital more aggressively and weaved, in my opinion, more of those capabilities into their TV buying earlier. So we see some differences like that. I do think, though, that the US remains a very unique market, as is the case across advertising, for us to hammer out this recipe, because of the amount of investment in advertising, because of the broadband connectivity rates, because of consumers ability and willingness to invest in devices and services. So mostly, I think that the recipes that we hammer out here, the kinds of services, the economics, the hybrid subscription and advertising economic models that we hammer out in the U.S. are highly exportable abroad.
Well, Scott Rosenberg, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Platforms for Roku, thank you so much again for being part of our Signal Conversations.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.